Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Total Recall podcast. Another episode aimed at startup founders and everybody interested in the startup community. This time, I am joined by Daniel Haven from Sloth. And formerly Sloth, as you've now exited that company. And I'm very keen to talk to you about that journey. So welcome.
Thank you very much. We're excited to be on your podcast.
Yeah, it's great to finally get you on here. I know you've been busy, and it seems every time that I reach out to communicate with you or to meet you, something exciting is happening. I seem to be that Midas touch. But why don't you just tell us a little bit about about you, the company that you've exited, a little bit about your journey as a startup founder, a serial startup founder, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. And now I'll do it high level, and then you stop me where you want, and we can dig further.
Okay.
Born and raised mostly in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. That's where I did my first startup in 2014, really out of a self-frustration. I myself was doing an online course based in Amsterdam at an American university. It was at the start of MOOCs, massive open online courses. People are probably familiar with Coursera nowadays and edX. And it was a fascinating experience because suddenly you would have the top educators, professors at Harvard and Stanford being able to share all of their learnings to 50,000 people simultaneously, which was really an exciting time. People started to reimagine education. What was interesting about it is that the content was being delivered, but when it came to the credentials and the exam itself, there was no really logical follow-up. Nowadays, there are digital credentials, but in 2014, those didn't really exist. I started to imagine why can't we actually be accredited for the same content that we are receiving very far away? And the reason for that was that universities essentially didn't feel comfortable from an integrity point of view to assess people remotely. So providing the content remotely was okay, but to assess, to make sure that the same exam standards are upheld as on their campus was very difficult for them. So that's when ProctorExam was invented. Basically, I found some people in Turkey, I believe, paid a little bit of money to essentially get a prototype going, which would identify the person behind the computer and do some check of where the person is located. That would provide the integrity to the universities. And as we went on, we understood that the world of assessing is way bigger than just academics. In the private sector, if you want to be an accountant in the UK, you have to go through an official certification process. If you're a doctor in the United States, if you want to become a lawyer, you do the bar exam. So it's a massive sector. Nowadays, everyone is being assessed in order to be certified. So we grew that over time. Was an incredible experience, really from A to Z, founding it all the way to growing it highly profitable, over 10 million in revenues, teams in Amsterdam, but also abroad. In 2020, we started to get offers from both our competitors and our big customers, and decided to sell. What was interesting about that M&A process is that there was no big venture capital in ProctorExam. So usually you have board members and people with more experience leading an M&A process, but this time around it was really me, an advisor who was a very good friend of mine, and that was an incredible experience. I remained with the company that acquired us for 1 year. It's a fairly known company called Turnitin out of the United States. During that 1 year, kind of understood that I get more excited about going through that 0 to 1 stage as opposed to I would argue Turnitin is has been around for a long time, so
Mm.
they're really
Hmm.
perfectioning currently their market position.
Yeah.
So I started to look around, met up with a friend, and created Sloth. And Sloth is focusing on the identity of in the cloud. So when it comes to identities, you've got employees
Mm.
within your organization that each have an identity when they want to access certain things.
Hmm.
But an identity is beyond an employee, can also be a machine identity, can be an
Yeah.
application, can be a certificate, whatever it may be. And we started to wonder, what do these identities have access to? And we found out, and it was very interesting because with ProctorExam, because we were filming people and verifying, we were scrutinized quite a lot.
Mm.
So people kept on asking us, is your data secured in transit? Are you GDPR compliant, etc.? But once the data lands within the organization, there isn't as much scrutiny. And what is interesting is that if you actually check within an organization who has access to what, it's almost a free for all, right? So people make sure that the data is secure from the customer to the organization that processes your data. But
Yeah.
once it lands in AWS, Azure, whatever, no one is really asking who has access to what, which is insane. And that's really where we focused. We focused on making sure that only the correct identities that have a validated need access data. That's what we did with Sloth.
It's really interesting, your journey, because I was kind of, first of all, struck by the fact that you're not a techie. Your background is non-techie. You're what I call the creative founder. Um, and you've kind of had a journey that I was just thinking how to connect the dots from A to B, which you've now just cleared up. You actually identified no, not a problem, but there was a need to secure the access and what is happening with people's data, more from almost a customer perspective, rather than you being inside the actual engine room, as it were, the software engineer engine room. That's quite an interesting journey. So how did you then get this product at Sloth, built? Is that where your friend comes in and he's the techie that helps you build? As a creative founder, it's sometimes challenging to think, well, how do I actually build this thing?
Yeah, indeed. And I think, when you look around and you look at successful startups, I truly believe in having a team. I think they even call it a founder's market fit, where you've got a team that is constructed out of, a hustler, a techie, and I think the third one is more on the creative designer side. And I myself, I don't know if I would be, the hustler or the creative, but I really obsess about a problem in market, really try to deep dive and always try to focus on putting myself in the shoes of the user. But then again, I do think it's incredibly important to have in that team at least two of those personas, and one of them really needs to be a techie.
Yeah.
Out of the two experience I've had, one was completely bootstrapped in a ecosystem, 2014 Amsterdam, where there barely was any risk capital. People weren't, there were a few startups. There wasn't a lot of investing going on. So really needed to do most of the work myself. And in the second startup, we went through Y Combinator. We managed to raise some funding from well-known Silicon Valley venture capitals. So we were able to actually spend more money. And I would always prefer to start with a kick-ass team, do as much as possible yourself, get into the nitty-gritty, because of number one, you get way more creative. And number two, you have to be really obsessive about everything you do in a startup as a founder. And preferably do as much as you can yourself in the beginning phases, I find. Because it's one of the most important things I've learned during my startup journeys. It's not about selling a product, it's about educating your potential user. about what their needs are, which could potentially not be your product, right? When you speak to the market, you have to be open-minded, and you can't just focus on selling your product. You have to listen, understand what their requirements are, what their needs are, and have a clear understanding of the ecosystem, of the market, to potentially refer them to a competitor or to something completely different. The market wants to speak to educated people and not salespeople.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a recent conversation on one of the previous episodes around getting that product fit right. And I think one of the key takeaways that I took from that conversation was going in and doing this market analysis, call it what you will, and asking hard questions straight away to fail fast with your idea. And it was typically around, why would you pay for this? Almost going in there with a cynical mindset with these people and saying, would you pay for this? If so, why? How could I make it better? If you're not willing to pay for it, why aren't you willing to pay for it? Instead of going in and say, you pay for this, right? Kind of performing the mom test. And I think where the creative founder and where you're kind of, somewhere between the design and the hustler profile come in is that willingness to get out and talk to as many people as possible, where perhaps the techie might be a little bit more introverted. They might be actually a little more hesitant to go and have those very challenging, difficult conversations. You may have found that in your experience.
Absolutely. You have personalities at the end of the day. I think indeed, and I've seen it with Sloth. To your point, I don't have a software engineering background. I mean, I taught myself some basics, again, online courses, fundamentals at Harvard. But more than that, I wasn't building the product myself, and even more so when it came to Sloth in the cybersecurity. I needed to teach myself everything from scratch. So it was incredibly important to have, a tech person that personality that could actually further build the product and have a clear understanding of, how the ecosystem works. What are the day-to-day products that developers use. But with that being said, even though you have different personalities, I strongly believe and hope that if your personality is more introvert, and you know what, I'm not the type of kid that enjoys doing networking. There are people that do that, but I just don't care with regards to my ego, and I enjoy going through the journey, strangely enough, of understanding what makes people tick. And that's why I really enjoy that 0 to 1, being obsessive about a problem, validating it in market, and not being scared indeed to have people look at me and say, what are you, a fool or something? Because you keep on having that, horizon in your mind where, when you start understanding how the market responds to your initial proposition, but you're understanding enough and listening well enough and adjusting to what they're saying, you'll get there. And that's what I truly enjoy.
And would you say that you're influenced in that naught? Let's stick in the naught category for now. Are you influenced by the end goal in that environment? Let's say you set out, you and your friend who've set up Sloth, let's build a company to sell. At that instance where you're then going out, right, we've got this idea of a product. Let's go and talk to as many people who would be our would-be customers. Is the end goal always in mind? You're going out there and you say, what, we're going to build this product and build the idea of this product around the future, around we are going to sell it, or is the process the same irrespective, and this is the process you follow?
So might be controversial what I'm saying, but I have thought about it, and every time I keep on thinking about a potential acquisition and trying to line things up for that to happen. In retrospect, I believe I'm not focusing on the right things. I'm spending too much money on potentially trying to get the right people to join. I'm dealing with cap table stuff, and all of that does help, right? With the acquisition in mind in the future, having been through 2 acquisitions, so it does help. But you're spending, I believe, time on the wrong things in the beginning. I think they call it the salami strategy. You have to cut the salami very, very thin and just focus on each small milestone and then go to the next one and the next one and the next one. Again, you can be strategic about things. You have to clearly understand that once you focus on a niche, there needs to be a bigger market where you eventually can grow to, but don't lose sight of that niche and don't spend too much time on the big markets. And this is true for me, by the way. I would say there are entrepreneurs with such a proven record that, you know, they can comfortably go to very big venture capitals and say, we're going to go after this $1 trillion market. We're going to start from the get-go with, you know, this massive plan, massive platform, and we're going to work, you know, in stealth for the next 2-3 years. And that's fair enough. I just think that for 99% of us, that's not the case. Yeah. And for 99% of us, do as much as you can yourself. Focus on a niche, on that vertical. Focus on acquiring users, money, and the more successful you are, eventually the better people you can associate yourself with. So the better people usually end up coming once there are already signs of successes. That's the same for investors and venture capitals. I've invested in a few companies, and some of them, you know, it's a struggle for them to raise money. But at the end of the day, I've seen it with ProctorExam as well. When you want the money and you need the money, the investors are not sure. And when they're not sure, usually that's not an investment. And when you don't need their money, you know, they'll be calling you up. So focus on the
attraction, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's cliche, but it's so true.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, really, because I speak to a lot of startup founders, you know, a lot of which are in stealth mode. They're looking for seed funding, or they're looking for that investment to help them propel, you know, their product or their team or their service, whatever it is that they're trying to do. What is your kind of framework? Let's say that you get your next startup idea and you think, right, this is my framework now. I've had 2 successful exits. I learned X from the first, I learned Y from the second. This is now my process. What would you be like 0 to 1? You know, if there's anybody listening here, it's their first time as a startup founder. What's the biggest kind of piece of this is how, you know, your next couple of steps look? What would that be?
So I keep on being fascinated by the team of Wiz, Asaf Rappaport, and 2 or 3 other people. Actually, I think a week ago or so, Gili Ra'anan, one of their investors, he's a famous investor here in Israel. He described their journey, where he says, you know, at the end of the day, it's about the team. But what he really emphasized was that the team understood, well, you need to start thinking about what market interests you, right? You have to have an understanding of the market. You can have a thesis about what you want to do, but speak with the market, speak with organizations, and start understanding what's their top 3 challenges, and be very open in such a discussion. And learn what makes them tick, because interestingly enough, whilst you can start with the thesis, if you truly enjoy the market in which you operate and you keep on hearing from organizations in that market, my problem is X, Y, and Z, and you hear that from several organizations, it will get you excited as well, right? And if you can then go in, start working on wireframes from a position where the market has told you what their problems are, as opposed to a thesis that you have had yourself, it's so much stronger. So I think that's definitely something that I would do. I would think of a market that fascinates me, and you know, after having been in education and cyber, I definitely think the education market fascinates me more. And I'm looking forward, and that's actually what I'm doing now, just trying to mingle in that market and understand what the problems are, and really get to a point where I get excited because of the problems that the market has communicated to me.
And that's about talking to as many people as you possibly can that are relevant, I think you can go on what I call the milk round quite easily and just find yourself having idle conversations with people. It's a nice talk, it's a nice conversation. It was nice to see you, without there being any real substance and direction to that conversation. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap. Um, and I think if I reflect on your journey with Sloth, now you've exited that company. Um, what's your kind of perspective on how you got there? What would you say is the point A to point B that got you to that successful exit? Because you were approached. So there were people knocking on your door, saying, Daniel, look, we got some money for you here. We want your company. And this time around, you actually kind of, I think, promoted a sale yourself. So what's the difference between the two?
Yes. The first one, we really were growing rapidly, hyper growth mode, highly profitable. And the market was booming. Got to a point where our competitors were looking to consolidate. So we had some offers. One of our bigger customers understood that there were some offers on the table, and we were so important to them that they actually ended up making the biggest offer. That was the most interesting to us. So that was a completely different journey. Whereas with Sloth, I started it, and I think it was a journey of approximately a year and a half, where many things didn't go as I hoped. And it got to a point where I understood I'm not moving the needle as I want to, as I've experienced also in the first startup. As opposed to going again through an entire journey of essentially spending more money than was invested in the company, I thought it would be best with what I have now to understand if the market would be interested. Indeed, actively approached several organizations through the same advisor actually in ProctorExam that helped me sell the company. And it ended up being a service company in the United States that was selling cyber products to the federal government. And they were looking for a SaaS product that they could essentially upsell. And again, I mean, we picked Sloth because it was in the identity space, which was really, it's really kind of a big frontier. We were focusing on access management, which was a growing pain. So we knew and we validated that there was a very, very big problem in market. We just weren't able to execute on that. I think, again, a lot of learnings there. But it concluded with me actively looking for an organization to acquire Sloth.
Okay. What would you do differently then? Now, if you went back to the start of Sloth again, how would you do it differently?
Definitely spend more time in the market and understand the market better. Focus better also on the team initially. I think that was also lacking from the get-go. Not having the capability to move the needle as much as we could with the initial team. So we actually used the funding in order to make progress. But again, I think similar to what I said before, ideally you have a team where you can already move the needle as opposed to relying on funding. So that's definitely what I would do differently. And I would say those two things mainly.
Okay. And I think the team is obviously one of the hardest things that a lot of startups suffer with. A bad hire, a poor hire, the wrong hire, call it what you will. How do you advise? How do you now kind of get to the point where you're recognizing A players? Because when you've got a big team, you can get your A players to recognize A players. But when it's a small team and it's you, maybe there's three of you in that first kind of bootstrap startup team, how are you identifying A players and what are you looking for that these individuals demonstrate that they can survive that environment, which is, it's the furnace, the startup bootstrap furnace?
So I would start maybe the other way around. What I would say is a false flag, and don't count on that. I think too often, me as well. I went for highly intelligent people, and also look at their past credentials.
Mm,
But I've just seen that not work. What actually has worked much more are ambitious people, highly motivated people, people that are hungry for something. Again, just because it's so fresh in mind, Gili Ranan, the famous investor here, is very specific, where he is investing in people that endured hardship. And again, he's highly successful. I don't think it's fair to therefore not have an entire group that potentially haven't gone through massive hardship and not be successful.
mm,
But you have to be hungry. I think the intelligence part is potentially less, and I would say the hunger, the
mm.
ambition, the obsessiveness,
Yeah.
wanting to move the needle yourself. Going out there, not having that ego. These are qualities that I would very gladly have people when they join the company, as opposed to highly intelligent people.
Yeah, just the people that are willing to move mountains to make it work. Yeah.
Exactly, and again, it's important to also ask the question: at what stage of the company are you? I think what I'm calling out is the specific beginning stage of the company. So
Hmm.
people that again want to go out there, want to adapt to what they're understanding from the market, want
Yeah.
to put themselves out there. But I've experienced more so with ProctorExam a stage where we needed to focus on streamlining processes. With over 100 companies, you have to start being more of a perfectionist. And that's a different profile. That's actually a profile that perhaps is less of a, putting themselves out there and just,
Yeah.
going full force, but actually a person that is able to take a step back, a little bit more perfectionist. So you have to again keep in mind what stage are you in. But
Hmm.
for the beginning, yeah, definitely go out there, and even though technology profile is extremely important, and an even better profile would be a technologist that is also willing to put themselves out there and speak to the users.
Okay. So your framework, your cookie cutter approach, as let's call it, as to go first, is to talk to as many people in the market that would be your buyer persona as possible. Don't go on the milk round. Have some specific outcomes for that conversation as you possibly can. Mass data points. Then the right people. Find the very hungry, the motivated, the people that have been through challenges and overcome them, that can solve them problems and are willing to do so time and time again. I always find that people that do startups multiple times, they're a bit of a glutton for punishment, but they know how to kind of endure and overcome. I build a hiring framework for startups, which is built on the back of the Marines, the Royal Marines hiring program, which I actually written an article about, which that's another conversation. But that hardship, that endurance, that kind of capability, the camaraderie that they possess is so applicable to a startup. And it's similar to what you're saying. So test the market, as much data, the right people, the hunger, the drive, the determination, the motivation to make that happen. And in what order, you're starting to touch on this now, but in terms of the order in which you bring people into the organization, do you hire first? Some people say, I hire a product person first, a technical product person. Some say I hire a software engineering kind of profile. What's your kind of go-to first hire, would you say, outside of yourself?
So outside of myself, it's definitely a tech person. Well, you know what? Let me get back on that. Even though I can do a lot myself with regards to wireframing, and I think the tools today get so good that essentially you would be able to wireframe yourself and have some nice designs out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be interesting to have a person that isn't just purely on the back end, but is able to also on the front end to showcase and
Mm.
visualize what the next product developments are. that would definitely be someone that could contribute a lot. But again, one of the things that many people always ask me is, should I start a company if I don't yet have the right team? And I think that's again a false flag. The best people end up joining when there are signs of successes, unless of course you have a proven track record. But again, that's only that 1%. So I think it's important to speak to the bigger crowd. Start yourself and get out there and do as much as you can. And then the good people will join. But indeed, don't focus on hiring long term. Only focus on what the short term needs are, especially if the first few hires will get equity. You want to make sure they definitely last for 4 years. If it's small stuff that you need to get done, get on Upwork, get on Fiverr. I mean, spend that $100. Be very, very clear on the details, which again, as a founder, you should take responsibility of. So if you're in a mindset where you're thinking of hiring your VP sales because you aren't able to sell, just don't do it, because don't outsource, the core issue of your startup to someone. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I've had some great comments throughout the journey of this podcast on that very point. If there's not a demonstratable sell there where you've been able as the founder to go and acquire your first few customers, how is somebody else that isn't you, that's come up with this baby of their own, going to do that? Okay, so in terms of setting up a company, there's going to be a lot of people here that will kind of be setting their company up with the dream. I'm going to sell it and I'm going to buy a boat and I'm going to retire, before I'm 40 years old or 30 years old or whatever. So the layers that they need to put in, are there things that aren't typical? You won't find in a YouTube video, that aren't just a normal get your product testing, blah, blah, blah. Are there things that you've learned that perhaps aren't in a book that you can give the advice to somebody? Like my biggest lesson, to give you an example, was about back office functions, was about finance, accounting, and the management of your, call it cash flow, your war chest. Are there things that you can give the advice to these people to say, get this right? Make sure you get this right, because it's a big one.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you're alluding to it. Finance is something that me as a founder, I don't have a finance background. So initially, I wasn't sure about it. Should I do it? Should I outsource it? Should anyone do it at this stage? Because I don't know if it's going to be a success. But over time, I've learned, both with my startups, but also again the startups that I work with, advise, invest in. You have to get your hands dirty as a founder, as a CEO. There's no way around it. Again, one of these things where you don't outsource, because you have to be responsible for what goes out of your company and what goes in. You have to have such a clear understanding of that, and have that level of not only hygiene, but deep understanding of every dollar that leaves your organization. And therefore also keep on questioning yourself, are there many dollars that are leaving your organization? Or again, can I do it myself? I think that's something that, from the get-go, don't overcomplicate it. I've actually recently helped create a spreadsheet for one of the startup. I think it took me half hour, because the founder was just struggling with this massive spreadsheet with 7 different tabs. This is a kind of pre-seed, seed stage startup. I mean, the only thing you need is at the top, just have the people working. So the cost, the cost is going to be the easiest part, right? Because it's mostly it's mostly cost. There's less income going in. So just have the expenses, the people, month by month by month, have a year-end summary. And at the bottom, do have, of course, amount of customers, have the revenue coming in per month. In the beginning phases, if each customer has a different plan, which can be the case because you're still looking for your price point, again, don't overcomplicate it. Take an average, but just have 2 line items. Number one, amount of customers. Number two, monthly revenue. And that's it. Don't overcomplicate it, but be in charge of it and make sure you actually do it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I read a really good book actually called Rock the Recession, which actually is a book I think every startup founder should read. It's, it goes into detail on those topics on how to navigate, what is quite a subjective term, actually, a recession, because a recession can be the loss of a customer. It can be a market-driven recession. It can be anything. But if you don't have a grip on those things to know what runway you've got, what cash flow you've got, what's in, what's out, you're doomed. And I think it's a very good point to anybody listening to really just spend some time and the basics of how to manage your cash flow, your pipeline, your forecast, and your runway, but keep it as simple as you possibly can.
Absolutely. If I can add one more thing that just struck me, and that's again something that I didn't know in my first startup, and I definitely learned in the second one, and I would take along, is the fact that founders, when they receive equity, people tend to assume that that equity is just given as a founder and that's it, but really make vesting plans for founders as well. In a hypothetical scenario where you've got, three founders, each has a third, make sure that each founder is on a vesting plan. I think currently the benchmark is 4 years. Just have founders on a vesting period with a cliff, because especially in the beginning stages, it could be that founders change teams, people leave, people don't leave, and just make sure that the company doesn't end up with a massive skeleton in the closet, which is a founder that is left after a year, has 20% equity. You don't have the money to buy that founder out. So make sure founders are vested similar to employees, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same mindset, especially the early employees that also get quite some equity, and the founders themselves.
Okay. And for anybody there that's now kind of, let's say, right, I've done that, check, right, I've followed Daniel's checklist, check. I'm at the point now where I'm trying to raise funding. Where's the best avenue for people to go? Because I have so many people ask me the question, right, I need funding, but everybody's saying no. Like, is there a networking kind of group? Is there somewhere where these people hang out where I can just direct listeners to?
I tend to be surprised how people rely exclusively on venture capitals for their initial fundraise. I remember at Y Combinator there was this very nice graph where they show how usually fundraising happens, and it's starting with a very small ticket of 50K, and then some other person joins with another 25K, and then you reach some critical mass, and then you have potentially a venture capital or just a very wealthy angel that puts in 500,000, 1 million. But you have to understand that similar to putting your value proposition out there, you have to put also you fundraising out there. Put on LinkedIn. Don't have your ego. I've met too many people that just want to fundraise from Andreessen Horowitz, and otherwise they think their startup is a failure. That type of stuff annoys me personally, but it's also really a recipe for failure, because it's putting your ego and your idealism of what a startup should be at front, as opposed to just making it a success. So put it out there everywhere on LinkedIn with your friends. I'm fundraising. Even, the fact that you could have a friend of yours willing to put, 5,000K. If that person beyond the actual capital is able to help you and open doors, so why not, have them join the journey? If they can open the extra door in order to get that first, second, third client, have 5 of your mates join. It's all about, again, exposing yourself. It's not just the capital. It's preferably about user acquisition, and be. Don't put your ego in front. It doesn't matter if the capital comes from Andreessen. Usually, it won't come from Andreessen. Like I mentioned, it's small tickets. Usually, you can see it 9 out of 10 fundraising starts with small tickets, and then it gains momentum and it grows. And if from the small tickets you can also acquire users, that's the ideal route.
And I think one of the most important things, if I think about my personal journey, as I've done two startups now, one funded, one bootstrapped, and in between the two, I took an MD role of a fintech organization. Um, the most important thing for me is working with people that excite you and that motivate you, and that you actually enjoy their energy. Um, I'm kind of starting a new company at the moment with somebody who, by chance, I didn't know this person beforehand, and we've just somehow kind of come together, and that person inspires me. They kind of make me think, right, come on, this is someone that I can bounce off. It's so important, right?
Absolutely. I think being now based in Tel Aviv, one of the success factors in this startup ecosystem is truly the fact that people expose themselves, and you end up meeting that person that wasn't in your first degree network, was in your second degree network, and it sparks and it works, and suddenly you have either founding team, or you have an advisor, or you have that person that does open your door to your most important customer that will
Yeah,
eventually make your company grow insane.
yeah,
So indeed, it is startup is really on all fronts when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to growing your business, when it comes to founding a team, hiring. It's putting yourself out there.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I don't know if you know who Stephen Bartlett is. He does a CEO podcast, Diary of a CEO. I actually met him the other day, and I was at his seminar, and he said, "Company." The word "company." It's just a collection of people, and it's just the people you have around you. And I think this is the importance of, in that early stage, in any stage actually. You get the wrong people in there who don't share your cultures, your values, or your ideas, your enthusiasm, you know like you said earlier in this conversation, have they been through something that you've got shared kind of emotions, that you can connect over. um, it's not so much a company. You can have the best product in the world, but if you build that company with the wrong people, it's going to fail. You might
And
sell
and
something.
and And I would say beyond that, after selling the company, the one thing that I hold dearest and I'm the most proud of and enjoy to this day are the people.
Yeah,
Again, 2, 3 years on after selling, still in a WhatsApp group, still, talking to one another.
yeah.
It's people.
I think interesting, like, to go back to your point on ego, and it's a point you've made a couple of times. And I try and remember who it was that said it to me, because as you can imagine, I have a lot of these conversations as you and I are sharing now, and I have learned so much in having these conversations. And the biggest takeaway for me is to not allow your ego to run your business, or to run your life, in fact, in any way. Now, my personal, outside of business, my background, I've got a love for martial arts, and I've done martial arts for a very long time, and one of the biggest lessons that you learn, that I've learned anyway, is your ego very, very quickly is taken away from you. When you think that
Yeah.
you're the best, you're the biggest, you're the strongest, somebody comes in and they beat the shit out of you, and then your ego goes away. And I think the reference that I'm making to a startup is that being a startup founder and being in that startup ecosystem, you are constantly taking hits, constantly. Mike Tyson said it the best about having a plan, and that plan being punched in the face repeatedly. And I think that is where people learn a lot about themselves, and their ego is their ego justified? Is an ego ever justified? I don't know. Where was yours? I can remember personally one very specific, example in my martial arts career where I was humbled very significantly by somebody from Brazil, and that took all the ego away. And I never, at that point after, had an ego. What was yours? Was it business?
I So it's interesting you say that. I dropped my ego, and I can very strongly say that the minute I accepted money from angels that I cared about, that I really got into a relationship with, that I highly respected, and I knew from that moment in time, who am I to have an ego when they put the money
Mm,
in me, right? It's a small team. They
mm,
trust in me. They worked, and you know what? Maybe that's something that I should do also in the next few startups. Truly understand where the money actually comes from. I will refer, and probably the angel investor wouldn't think that I keep on thinking about his specific case. But one of our early angel investors put in quite a sum of money. And I've spent quite some evenings with that person where, the person told me where he started his career, being a police agent, and really working himself up, eventually having a business, and having an understanding of that journey where for each penny he's worked so hard, and then having him trust me with his money. That really makes me go definitely the extra mile, and again, dropping that ego and begging left and right when it's needed. It doesn't make sense to have an ego when you know that people that have worked hard for their money trust you with their money.
Yeah, I think about the startup founders that I've dealt with in the last. I mean, I've been doing this nearly 15 years, so as you can imagine, I've spoken to a lot. Um, it's rare that I meet anybody that has an inflated opinion of themselves, especially when you're into startup 2 and startup 3, because you've just, you've just been broken down and broken down and broken down to the point where that's the way it is. Especially with the economy, the way that it's been the last 12, 18 months. I think it's been a tough place to be a startup founder. And I think, like, if I think about, I think it's called gold. There's like a gold medal syndrome, call it what you will, where if you think about an Olympic medalist and they win their gold medal, great, on the podium, all the flashing lights, all of the, the plaudits and the accolades that come with it. The next day, it's like almost a feeling of deflated kind of, I'm a bit stuck now. Did you find that after you'd sold?
Yes. It was such an anticlimax. It was at the height of COVID. Actually ended up not even signing the last required documents because I provided, I think it's called, it's not called an affidavit. What do you say when you give someone, your attorney, the right to sign for you?
Sign on your behalf.
Yeah, exactly. So I had that, and the lawyer signed on my behalf the final document, and I'll never forget closing my laptop, realizing that the company was sold, a company that I worked on for 7, 8 years. This was before I had a family, before I had a girlfriend, a partner. So that was really, something that I was invested in day in, day out. When my mates were having fun, I kept on questioning, what am I doing with myself? And that company was sold. And yeah, the day after, you wake up, and it's the same routine. And I didn't get, to be honest, I didn't get any thrill from it. Again, the thrill came a few months later when I realized what we created with ProctorExam. And the one thing that I valued the most was the team. It was the team that was operating on a level where they trusted each other. It was a team that essentially was acquired and was outperforming with the company that acquired us. It was a team where, again, the people now kept on going up the ladder in the new company, and that's really the thrill. And it's interesting because when I keep on thinking about doing a third startup now, of course you have to be obsessive about solving a problem and understanding what the need is. But I would say very close to that is experiencing again the thrill of having a team where people like each other and fight for each other and establish something together.
Yeah, I think it's a common conversation really that I have with people that have exited companies. They actually take more pride in the people that they've worked with than the actual product that they built itself. And I think if I think about Steve Jobs and some of his late interviews, he referenced the people that he worked with before he kind of actually, was talking about the products that they built and what he took from, I think, his key 2, 3 founders. Again, company, people, that is kind of the cornerstone of every successful business, right? And It's the hardest to get right. It is the hardest to get right. And where do you go? I think if people don't have a good network, if people aren't good at kind of navigating LinkedIn and interviewing, not everybody's a good interviewer. How do you do it? Um, what's
I
your
mean,
kind of method?
you've alluded it to yourself, I think, earlier. It's usually nothing in life really comes or tends to come easy, and I think having a good team around you usually also doesn't come easy. And it's making sure that if you don't have a good network of your own, I mean, I moved to Tel Aviv because my wife is Israeli. She has a family here. So it was very strange for me because I had a first business in Amsterdam
Mm,
that I managed to grow, hire people. So my network was pretty strong in Amsterdam because, of course, outside of that company, you also worked with a second degree, right? You had your lawyers, accountants. So I, 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 I had, I would say, a good team, enough people around me to potentially do something new. And then I moved here, and I basically needed to start from scratch. And it doesn't work by checking on LinkedIn. Well, it might work as an intro, as a door that could open to meet more people, to check on LinkedIn,
mm,
who is around you geographically. But do go to the old school meetups and go outside, find like-minded people.
yeah.
Try to even offer your services in startup hubs or whatever it may be, because it's hard work to meet the right people. And the reason why I say it's hard work is because for me it also doesn't come naturally to just
Mm,
go outside and talk to people.
yeah.
It's if you don't have it, it's a skill that you have to keep on training, because I find that to be a job as well, to
Yeah.
meet the right people.
Yeah. I think it's important to, I suppose, understand what makes the outlier of a successful, founder, CEO, or person in general. And I often think it's a combination of skills that perhaps other people don't quite have. Um, and if you're a fantastic engineer, fantastic software engineer, you've got the ability to build something from scratch with your hands. If you then add the skill of being a salesperson at the same time, you have a very dangerous set of skills. And these are often the people that make very successful founders or very successful people in general, is the ability to think, right, this is the direction I want to go. What skills can I add to my bow that make me better at doing this than anybody else, that gives me that competitive advantage? I don't know if you watch football or soccer. If you think about, I don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo, he's got skills that are, very complementary to one another. And he's probably not the best sprinter in the world. He's probably not the best header of a ball in the world. He's probably not the best finisher, free kick taker, but he's very good at all of those things in combination. And that's what sets him above and beyond anybody else. So if you were to advise somebody now and say, right, okay, I'm looking at your background, these are typically the 3 or 4 skills that you can have in combination that will see you become successful. What would you say they are?
I would allude back to that hungerness and ambition to add, indeed, potentially the skill sets that you don't already have. I think it's fair that most people are either educated or they're highly skilled in one specific set. But the fact that a person that is ambitious isn't remaining comfortable and essentially cashing in on that one skill set, but is looking to acquire new skill sets. I think that shows a trait, which is that hungerness,
Mm,
and that is, to your point, the ideal, to be not comfortable, but to put yourself out there and essentially be uncomfortable,
mm,
and keep on working.
yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because many, I don't remember if it was Bill Gates or someone else, but they tend to also put out there that they're looking for lazy people, people that are highly intelligent and are looking to cut corners,
Hmm.
which again, I'm sure there's a situation where that's a great personality
Yeah.
to have.
Mm,
But I personally would have a hard time working with a lazy person that is constantly trying to cut corners, because
Yeah.
again, that kind of is contradictory to that hungness mentality.
Mm. I think it depends where you play those people to that
Of
strength, you
course.
know. I think if I think about the layers of a business, and I think it was the founder of LinkedIn who written a book. I think it's called Blitzscale. I read some years ago, and that's where I got that framework, that idea to build that interview framework from the Marines, because it was categorized into three different phases of a startup's journey. One is the Marines, where you're, like you say, hunger, drive, must succeed, must achieve, must make this work. Once that's achieved, you then send in the military, to build infrastructure
Mm.
on top of that. That phase is then complete, and you put in the layer, which is the military police, who then police everything that's been built. And I think layer 2 and 3 is perhaps where those people could operate best, but I don't think they would operate in that very first inception team that's put together, because, like you say, they need to be just hustling all day, every single day to just get a win, right?
Absolutely. So it's indeed fascinating. I don't know. You mentioned you have an article about this, but I would say that's so important, and it's the fundamentals, because we keep on
Mm,
talking about the team, but having a clear understanding what people you need in the beginning, what people you need afterwards, and what people you need at the end, and not conflating. Because
yeah,
again, having a highly intelligent person that is cutting corners in a founding team, I'm not sure. I'm
yeah.
really I'm looking forward to have a discussion with someone on that topic, but I can't imagine it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I think, I mean, I love startups and everything about startups. I could sit and talk to you all day about, the learnings, what I've learned, the pains that I've been through, the pains that you've been through, and we could probably chew the fat, which I'll next time in Israel will do for sure. But I'm conscious of time, and I'm very thankful of your time, to share your experiences and your journey with everybody listening. My goal with this podcast is to really deep dive into specific conversation points, whether it's how you market it yourself, how you build that first customer and scale it. And in our case, talking about that journey of having sold an organization and the layers that you follow and that cookie cutter approach. And I think, given the circumstances now that you find yourself in having sold, I would suggest that anybody who's looking for perhaps a NED, perhaps for somebody that can come into their startup organization as an advisory, or perhaps somebody that's looking for someone like yourself that's been through these journeys, are they free to reach out to you and perhaps bring a pitch deck to you?
Absolutely, and I enjoy it, and I wish more would do it.
Mm,
Again, just try. No egos on my side, and you mentioned it specifically. Many startup founders don't have egos, so there shouldn't be any barrier. Don't think twice about it. Just do
yeah,
it, and worst case, no reply. But
yeah,
usually that doesn't happen.
yeah. Well, hopefully this encourages people to do just that. Um, so what I will do is I'll put a link. Obviously, I'll copy your link in when I post this on LinkedIn. This, is also going to be on various podcast platforms, but where people can contact you typically would be LinkedIn. So I'll make sure that people know how to do that. Uh, but look, Danny, it's been great to finally sit down and have this length of a conversation with you. And I look forward to seeing you in Israel very soon.
Looking forward to as well, and good luck with everything. And really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Take care. Bye.
Bye.